Hi, I'm Joe Oliver. I'm a clinical psychologist and ACT therapist, and today I'm going to talk to you about the concept of diffusion, a powerful tool in acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, and it's used to help us break free from the grip of our thoughts. Thinking is like a tool, and it's a nifty one at that. It helps us communicate, understand, gather knowledge, but just like any tool, it can be misused and cause harm. So, for example, have you ever found yourself endlessly replaying thoughts over in your head, like that time you said "you too" after the waiter said "enjoy your food"? Or have you ever woke up at 3 a.m. in the morning worrying about something really important, like where do all your missing socks end up? So this is where fusion comes into play. Fusion is when we become so tightly intertwined with our thoughts, like literally fused together with them, that we're unable to separate ourselves from them and they start to dictate our behavior. We lose touch with the influence with the world around us, and it's like we're fused with our thoughts, unable to see them as just as thoughts, passing mental events. Fusion can become incredibly restrictive, and it prevents us taking actions aligned with our own values. When we're fused with our thoughts, they can become all-consuming. They take up space in our minds and they affect our emotions. We might constantly replay the past mistakes or worry about the future, and all this can lead to stress, anxiety, extra helpings of sadness or emotion that just is built on layer upon layer upon layer. And it's important to say it's not just the presence of these unwanted thoughts that's the main issue. It's crucially our relationship with these thoughts. And that's why defusion becomes a really important intervention. Defusion is about creating some metaphorical distance from our thoughts. It's not about proving them right or wrong. It's about relating to them less literally. So by defusing, we can see our thoughts as just thoughts, perhaps just mental events, and we free ourselves up from their immediate grip. There's this amazing quote, often attributed to Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning, and it goes like this: "Between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response." And I love that, because it's in our response that lies the potential for our growth and our happiness. And this space is so important, because if we can slow down the automaticity of our responding to thoughts, that's when we can really truly create space for our values to flourish, and that's so crucial. You can probably hear how this contrasts with typical methods of dealing with our thoughts, which might look a little bit like when we argue with them, we rationalize against them, try and discount them with evidence to the contrary. And of course these techniques can be really useful, and there's a time and a place for them, but there's several things to keep in mind if we enter into those kind of strategies. First, sometimes by using more thinking to tackle thinking can actually inadvertently exacerbate the issue, and we end up getting to this kind of sticky mess with more and more thoughts, and we struggle to get out of the mire. Sometimes also it's important to say that we don't necessarily believe our thoughts or hold on to them really tightly because they're correct or truthful. We do it because they just feel right. They just sort of feel true. And when this emotional resonance is happening, it's often because it's connected to an old piece of learning history or something we learned a long time ago. Diffusion interventions help us notice when our thoughts are unhelpfully regulating our behavior, which means that they govern what we're doing in a way that perhaps is not what we would necessarily choose to do ourselves. We learn to unhook from them, allowing us to take effective action towards our valued goals. So it's not about eliminating or challenging thoughts, it's just bringing them along for the ride. So let's consider a scenario where someone believes themselves to be damaged goods, and this leads them to avoid asking for their needs to be met in a relationship. Rather than directly challenging the thought head-on, an ACT practitioner would rather explore the function and the cost of the thought. And they might ask questions like, when you're caught up with this thought, how does it work? And the person might say something like, well, it's not good for me, but it keeps me safe because it means that I don't open up to people and get hurt. On the other hand, though, it does stop me from getting close to people, those people around me, and I often feel lonely. So the ACT practitioner would help the individual create some psychological space between themselves and the thought. And this would empower them to make more conscious and deliberate choices that they could choose. So rather than the thought or the belief kind of doing the choosing for them. Here's some practical diffusion techniques, some of the ones that I use regularly myself when I'm working in therapy, and these are designed to help you break free of the grip of your thoughts. Just a note, it's not about getting rid of the thoughts, it's this notion of changing the relationship with thoughts. Notice and label. Noticing thoughts and labeling them is an elegantly simple technique, but a very powerful one. To begin with, start noticing when you're fused with your thoughts, and that might be when you feel kind of caught up, or you feel rigid, or you feel disconnected from your values. And as you do this, label them as things like just thoughts or mental events to create this sort of sense of detachment and space. I like to say to myself, there goes my failure story again. Thank you for coming along. Okay, the second technique is called I'm noticing I'm having the thought that. It's really simple and just adds a little extra context around a thought. And let's take one that for me often hooks me, and it's called, for me, I am incompetent. The I am incompetent story. When I get gripped by it, I might kind of narrow my behavior and do things like work really hard to prove I'm not incompetent to the world. Or I might hide away so no one can see just how incompetent I really am. Let's just say this. We're going to just go over this thought 3 times and invite you to say it along with me. The first time, as it is, I am incompetent. It has this kind of heavy weight to it. I am incompetent. Second time, I'm just going to add a little bit of extra context around it. I'm having the thought that I'm incompetent. I'm having the thought that I'm incompetent. Okay, and third time, just going to add a little bit more context. I'm noticing I'm having the thought that I'm incompetent. I'm noticing I'm having the thought that I'm incompetent. Okay, and perhaps you can see in that there's a little bit more spaciousness from the thoughts. The thought still remains there, but with each iteration, it just kind of gets perhaps a little further away. And there's a bit more space for me to move a bit more wiggle room. And in that space, I could perhaps choose what I'd want to do. Third technique, it's about history and remembering the origins of some of these thoughts and beliefs. Sometimes when a thought pops up and it feels true, it's like, I don't know, it's there, it's true. It's like, is the sky blue? Am I incompetent? Like, these things are facts. So remembering though that where these thoughts originated from, again, helps us just get a little bit more space from it. There's a couple of questions I like to ask around this that helps sort of provide a bit more historical context. And the first goes like this. Given your history, given all the things you've been through, all the things you've learned, your upbringing, your early experiences, does it make sense that you would struggle with this particular thought? And for most people, once we sort of do a bit of a historical review, probably the answer is yes, it does. It does make sense that I would struggle with this thought that I'm incompetent, or whatever the history is, that it makes some sense, provide some understanding about why that's the case. The second question I like to ask is, given that, what would be the most helpful thing for you to do at this moment when this is occurring? What could you do to support yourself? What could you do to be kind to yourself? How could you support yourself to be the best version of yourself that you could be at this moment while this thought is here? Next technique, and this is another really simple one, it's called thanking your mind. And the reason for this is that although sometimes the thoughts that come up that hook us often can feel very, judgmental maybe, or critical, or certainly at least unhelpful, often when we explore a little bit deeper, there's a reason that they're there. It's like a part of us or our mind is somehow trying to protect us or keep us safe or make sure that harm doesn't happen. So thanking your mind is a way to say thank you for producing these thoughts, even the unhelpful ones, and as a way to acknowledge their presence without getting entangled with them. And also noticing that there's an underlying helpfulness or intention to help along with it. So it's not like I said in a sarcastic way, like, oh, thanks, mind. It's like it's genuine, thank you, I appreciate what you're doing here to help. And I'm going to refocus my attention over here to something more useful. And there you have it, a glimpse into the power of diffusion. By diffusing from our thoughts, we can break free of their grip and therefore have more spaciousness and choice about how we respond, and therefore more able to live a more meaningful and fulfilling life. So remember, thoughts are just thoughts, and we can cultivate this ability to choose how we respond to them. I hope that's been useful, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line.